Oh wow, my ear is kind of sticking out like an elf. So cool. A perfect segue into what I'm going to be talking about in this video today, which is Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. This book was released on October 2nd, 2012, and it's essentially about a girl named Sophie Foster who finds out that she is an elf after dealing with telepathic abilities since the age of 5. She discovers she's an elf through a boy named Fitz who teaches her all about the elven world, and she ends up moving to the elven world and leaving her family in San Diego behind, and she ends up going to this elven school and finding out that she may or may not be a part of this conspiracy theory called the Black Swan and / Moonlark, and she finds out that there are more sinister things behind her living in a human world as an elf. And I remember I picked up this book when I was 12 years old. Now, the date is kind of important because this book came out when I was 13. I was a day and a month exactly from being 13. And over the summer, we would go to the mall or the library because we didn't have any AC in our house. So we would just kind of hang out there. And I remember I would just read books all the time. And I remember picking up this book at the age of 12 because I was like, oh, hey, this main character, she's the same age as me. So I'm gonna read this book because that's cool. And I read it and I had thoughts. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and start with my rating of the book. My rating is always out of 12. And this is gonna be very controversial because I know for a fact, I went through Goodreads and just to kind of look through what people were saying, and for the most part, people love this book. And I don't hate the book. As someone who loves reading middle grade books and just in general, who loves these kind of series, I'm reading Harry Potter, and the difference in writing and in the world building and in character development is huge. And this book has a lot more pages than Harry Potter, and it has a lot more books than Harry Potter. But I read up to book 5 and I just remember not being satisfied with what I was giving. So, and obviously this is a rating based purely on book 1, and I think book 1 was probably one of my least favorite books in the series. I do think the series gets better as the books go on, but I just wasn't the biggest fan of book 1, which is why I'm giving it a 6 out of 12. Ugh. So sorry to Keeper fans, hear me out. If you're a fan of these books, hear me out. I'm sure you'll agree with some of the things I have to say, because this book series is one of those book series that people really, really love. I'm assuming it's because this book series is mostly catered to kids 8 to 12, like it says in the back of my book right there. I'm not sure if you can see. I'm assuming that those are the little kids that are like rating the book 5 out of 5 stars without really ever thinking of it, because they really like the book, and that's fine. I actually kind of enjoyed my read. It made me feel like I was in 2012 again. It made me feel like a little 12-year-old again, so I understand why people really like it. Maybe it makes them feel nostalgic. It makes them go back to middle school. So I understand why people like it, but I feel like if I'm gonna be fair, I'm not just gonna give it extra points for nostalgia, especially a book that isn't... Like, you know, I did a book review on Ginny B. Jones, but that's completely different because that book was meant for actual little kids. It was made for like 5-year-olds. But this book, even though it is catered to kids 8 to 12, it's very much written in the same vein as Harry Potter. I remember the most liked, I guess, Goodreads review, just the whole entire review was about how similar it was to Harry Potter. And this book has so many similarities to Harry Potter. And I think that is a valid, like, criticism, because if Harry Potter can capture the minds of kids as young as 5 to, like, adults as old as 50, why can't this book do the same thing, you know? It seems like there's a very specific demographic of people that like this book, and I think it tends to be just middle school kids. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I gave this book such a low score, is because I, as an adult, had like kind of struggled reading this. It was an easy read. I just didn't like the writing style. I mean, that is a personal preference of mine, but I also feel like other people must have the same or similar ideas as me, because no one over the age of 18 is really reading these book series. It seems to me that the only people that are the people that started this book series as little kids like me. And I'm not the biggest fan. I don't keep up with like the fandom culture of this book. In fact, I don't even know if this book has a fandom. I think it does. Like after going through Goodreads, and I think the wiki's pretty active, so I'm assuming that it does have a pretty big fandom, or a decent sized fandom. Interesting to me how this fandom doesn't really seem to grow after it existing for more than 10 years. It's almost entering its 12th year, and obviously Shannon is still writing books for the series, which is one of the main reasons why I picked up the series, because I really want to do a book review on a really large series that's still ongoing. Even if she does decide to, you know, end the book series in the next few years, I still do plan on trying to catch up. So I think it'll be a motivating factor for me to like kind of churn out these book reviews video faster. Overall, I think it's really interesting just how few people over the age of 18 who want to read this book from scratch. There's so many people out there who didn't start reading Harry Potter until they were like in their 20s, but no one is really starting this book in their 20s. I mean, I don't count because I did read this book. I read up to book 5. And what made me remember this book again was like a few years ago. I don't know, I had to go to Walmart for something. I forgot something important. Maybe I think I used to have to buy a SIM card for my phone. So I went in there and bought that. And I'm like going through the book like shelves and stuff. And I remember seeing this book and I saw the cover and I was like, whoa, this cover's so cool. I think it was book 7. I think it was Flashback. And I remember reading the synopsis and I was like, oh wait, I think I've read this book. And I came home and I was just like, oh, I remember this book series. But anyway, we gotta start with the actual book review, aka the actual reasons that pertain to the book, not just, I didn't even realize that the fridge was on, but I guess ignore that. I don't know what that is. It's like the wood creaking. But we're gonna just go ahead and start with the actual reasons why I'm not the biggest fan of this book. The first reason is one of the reasons why I couldn't, like, it took me a lot longer to like finish this book because I kept stopping and going, Sophie? Because Sophie is, and I know this term is outdated, but I don't really have any other word for it because she fits it so well, and I'm so sorry. I know she gets better as the book series goes on, but in the first book, she's just like so close to being a Mary Sue. If she isn't one, she's super close to being one. And it's just kind of frustrating as a reader. I think Shannon's trying to make her relatable, but it's hard to like kind of relate to her because of how insanely overpowered she is. Okay, so these are the list of powers she has in the first book. And obviously this is like my own perception of powers, and she technically only has like a certain amount in the book, but like in my perception, like these are powers, like these are things that no one else in the book can do except for her. These are basically her own exclusive powers. The main one is telepathy. Now, a lot of the characters in this book series have that power. There's just a lot of telepaths in the book series, but it is described as being a rare power, and she has that. And as well as having telepathy, she also has telekinesis. Mentioned in the book that it's not normal for her to be able to withstand very large lampposts, which happens in the second book. A lamppost falls on her, and she holds it up with her mind, and 18,000 tons, and that's not something a normal telepath can do it, but she can do it. She has a rare power, and she has telekinesis along with that power, and that power is also, her telekinesis is also very powerful. She can lift that much weight. And two things is that they're kind of related to telepathy, is the fact that no one can read her mind. Like, her mind is impenetrable, which is a power in itself, because if her mind is impenetrable, that means she can keep secrets. I mean, that can make her a very extremely important person in the future. But I feel like this is a topic that would have been talked about more. I know that it is talked about quite a bit in the book series, but not enough to kind of satisfy me as a reader. Like, this girl is powerful. Like, she can think whatever she wants and no one will ever know about it. And besides that, she can go into anyone's mind. I think elves with telepathy, they know how to practice like blocking to make sure other people with telepathy don't read their minds. But Sophie, she can read anyone's mind. It doesn't matter how good their blocking is. So those are 4 powers. Two of these are connected to telepathy, but no one else can do that besides her. So I'm gonna count them as her own power. And on top of that, she has like this brain push where she uses her brain to control stuff. And she can also use this to connect to other people with telepathy. She does this with Fitz. I think they were playing like a game, and she reads his mind from very, very far away, something that is not normal in the books. And she also used her mind to like push energy out. And then they play the game during their physical education class, and she ends up using her mental force and her mental energy to push Fitz into a wall, and it's like super powerful. She ends up winning that game of splashing, I believe. She's a telepath, and she just has so many little itty-bitty things that make her more powerful than the average telepath, and being a telepath is already rare in this world. And another reason why she's overpowered is not on top of all the things that she can do with telepathy, she has a photographic memory. It would make sense as to why she's so smart. Like, first book, she discusses it almost immediately that she has photographic memory. She just memorizes everything that she ever looks at. She just looks at something once and she knows what it is. And another ability that she has is being a polyglot. That means she can understand and speak any language in the world, regardless of what creature is speaking in. So she understands like troll languages and gnomes and French and the ancient Elven language. Like, never had to learn how to speak Elf. She just already knew how to do it. And she not only already knew how to do it, but she spoke it in like the perfect accent. If you include all her other powers and the fact that she gets even more as the book series goes on. I think she gets like 3 or 4 more. I think she gets 1 per book. I mean, if it makes sense for the story, there's 1 book where she doesn't get a power. But other than that, she gets like a new power every single book. And then the only thing that she's not really powerful in is the fact that she can't read runes. When I found that, I was like, oh great, there's something that's kind of like she has an obstacle for once. And it turns out that runes aren't important because no one uses runes. So the one thing that she can't do, the obstacle that she can have in the whole book series, is something that's not even relevant. So overall, the reason why I think Sophie's a bit of Mary Sue is because she has a lot of powers. She has telepathy, no one can read her mind. She can read anyone's mind. She has a brain push. She has telekinesis. She has photographic memory, and she is a polyglot, which is insane. And on top of that, she has this one character trope, which I find really annoying, is pretty but doesn't know it, which is fine. There are people that are like that. There are people that are like, maybe they don't have good self-esteem and they just don't think very highly of themselves. It's just really weird to me reading this book as an adult because she's 12. Like, obviously 12-year-olds are insecure. I'm not trying to erase that, but it is really weird trying to like make her beauty something that's important when it's not. When you're 12, you shouldn't be worrying about whether you're pretty or not. You should be worrying about like getting good grades in school and just overall like your hobbies. Like maybe you're an athlete, maybe you like to sing. Like, you should be focusing on those kind of things instead of worrying about your physical appearance. That's gonna end up changing in a few years because that's normally when you start hitting puberty. So I don't understand why her looks were even mentioned. And another thing that I think is kind of Mary Sue-like is the fact that she has a lot of love interests. And by a lot, I mean she has 3, but she's 12. Like, why does she need 3 love interests? Not even just the love triangle, 3 love interests. She has Fitz, Keith, and Dex. She only really likes one of them in the first book. She only really likes Fitz. But Keith is, I think it's pretty obvious from the get-go that he's supposed to be like some sort of love interest because he kind of flirts with her a bit, which is fine. And then Dex clearly has a crush on her, but it's very one-sided. But still, those are like 3 potential love interests that she has already at the age of 12. It just feels weird. Like, do we need to focus on her love interest? I just feel like there are more interesting things about the book besides the love interest. Obviously, people have their preferences. Like, some people probably really, really want her to be with Fitz, and some people really, really want her to be with Keith. And I think that's perfectly fine. But I think about when it comes to these book series, and I think Harry Potter's are good, and I hate comparing, but Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, and even The Hunger Games does a really good job, like talking about the concept of romances within their characters, but not making it the main topic of the series. Like, there's romance in Harry Potter, but you don't really get any hint of romance until like book 4, not book 1 when Carrie's 11, not until he's 14 essentially. And even then, it's like that's not even the main thing of the book. It's just like some small, like there's like a few chapters of him talking about it. Same thing with Percy Jackson and with The Hunger Games. The main characters have a lot more motivating them and a lot more stuff going on with their lives that allows them to have their love life be what I call an appetizer. You know, the main story is like the burger and the romance is the fries. And that's normally what I like in my book series. Like, I don't want romance to be the main meal. I want it to be kind of the appetizer. And these books do it really well. And I feel like this book would really be a lot better if it worked that way. And even though the first book isn't really that annoying about it, like, I think she does a good job going back and forth between the two, but I do think it would need to be toned down a bit. But I do think it's interesting that Shannon decided to give her that many love interests when we could have been fine with just 2. We could have just been fine with Fitz and Keith. Like, we didn't really need Dex to have a crush on her. I think it would really be cute to have like a male and a female best friend and that's just what they are. They don't have a crush on each other, they're just best friends. And I think that would have been really cool to teach kids because there's still people out there that think that girls and boys can't be friends, and I think that's bull. I'm sorry, but I disagree with that. And another thing that kind of makes her a Mary Sue is she shares like a lot of quirks with the author. They both have blonde hair, they both have brown eyes, they're both from Southern California, they both have the same stuffed elephant, they both have the same kind of anxiety response where they tug their eyelashes. I watched a few interviews with Shannon. Obviously, she's claiming that, you know, that was by accident, but I don't think that's by accident. I mean, unless she wrote the story as a really little kid, then yeah, I'd probably understand it. But according to my research, I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me if I say anything that's extremely incorrect. She didn't start writing Keeper of the Lost Cities until she was like 17 or 18. And I feel like one of the first things, at least as someone who does like writing in their free time. Like, one of the first things that I envision when I'm like writing is like the aesthetics. What does the world look like? What does the person you're writing about look like? I find it interesting that she just is saying like, oh, I didn't think about that at all. She just accidentally looked like me. Now, Shannon is claiming that she didn't really know that she'd giving Sophie her own features until much later in the book series, or until someone pointed it out to her. And
look-alike
kind
of picture just to see. We can put it up for a moment. Like, you know, like there's the beautiful hair.
Yeah, and that was completely accidental. Like, I kind of gave her blonde hair because I had based her very, very loosely on Legolas.
Oh, yeah.
And then I gave her brown eyes because I wanted there to be something identifiable about her appearance that would be different, but I didn't want it to read like race.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people would say hurtful things, and the last thing I wanted to do was potentially hurt a reader.
Sure.
So I went with eye color because it felt kind of safe, and I went with brown eyes because usually when you see drawings of elves, they have blue eyes. And it didn't even occur to me that Sophie had blonde hair and brown eyes like me until we got the cover art, and my agent's first comment was, she kind of looks like you. And I thought, oh no, should I change it? Like, everyone's gonna think I tried to make her look like me. But I was so used to seeing her that way in my head that I couldn't change her. So it really was kind of completely accidental. But I hear that a lot, that Sophie looks like me, which is a great compliment because the artist has made her very, very, very pretty. So.
Yeah.
That kind of annoys me because that's the first thing you think of when you're thinking about characters. That's from an author perspective, even though I'm not really an actual author. I just kind of sometimes write on my own. I don't really think that's a good excuse. I think that she probably started off as her own, and a lot of people write that way. A lot of people like creating self-inserts and then creating their own little world where they have, you know, a lot of boys crushing on them, and they're pretty and they have overpowered, and this is just like all these things that are like leading me to believe that maybe Shannon, that wasn't an accident. That's all I'm saying. And another thing is, I don't really consider this as being a Mary Sue-ish, but it is something I've noticed in a lot of characters that are considered Mary Sue's, is that they're very reactionary. They don't make decisions on their own. Like, Sophie's story doesn't move on unless she's dragged into a situation or unless something accidentally happens to her. All she does is react to things happening to her. She doesn't really do things. I think the only thing that she did was she purposely cheated on tests, and then she called herself out for it, which I think is great. I think that's fine. But I kind of wish more of the story was Sophie having a lot more agency in what she does, instead of just allowing herself to be dragged on to these situations and to accidentally fumble into certain situations. I wish Sophie had a lot more autonomy in her decisions, and I feel like she doesn't really have a lot of autonomy. Obviously, she wants to have more autonomy. She wants to know more about her life. She wants to know what's going on in her world and understand it a bit more, but she just kind of complains about it, but she never does anything more. Instead of reading her teacher's mind and being like, oh my god, I read your mind, I know what the test is about, I'm sorry I cheated, and then getting in trouble for it, I feel like it would have been a lot more refreshing if she read, if Alden is a character in the books, he's Fitz's dad, and he hides a lot of stuff from Sophie, and I'm just like, Sophie, read a little bit of his mind. You don't even have to read his mind. Go through his paperwork. Do something about it. Like, if he is hiding stuff from you, you need to, and you really need to find this stuff out, you need to do something about it. And that's just my own perspective. Maybe there are other people that prefer, following a character that's reactionary, that doesn't really make decisions on their own, because, the story is easier to follow, and it makes them feel more akin to the character. Overall, I think Sophie's a bit of a Mary Sue because she is overpowered, is pretty but she doesn't know it, has a lot of love interest, is a little bit too much like the author, and 5 because she is a little bit of a reactionary character, which is a thing I've noticed in other characters that have been called Mary Sues. And like I said, Mary Sue is an outdated term, so I'm sorry if this offends anyone. I don't really have any other thing to call it. I know I'm equally as judgmental as to Gary Stu, which is the male version of this, but obviously female characters are a bit more judged for this stuff, and I'm aware of that. And now we're gonna go on from the main character, because I don't really have a lot to say about the side characters. None of them are really that well developed. I think Fitz is a pretty interesting character, but he doesn't really develop, and so is Keith. I think Keith is a fan favorite, and he's a character with the most personality, so I understand why people really like him. But I don't really see a lot of character development yet in the book series, so I don't feel ready to speak about the other characters. just yet. I will be talking to them as I go through like my book review, but this book is so centered around Sophie. Like, it's so obvious that she's the main character, that she's the chosen one. Every chapter, everything about this book just revolves around Sophie, so I feel like I have the most to say about her. So first thing I did when I opened the book and I read was I questioned, why is Sophie a 12-year-old senior? Now, Sophie is supposed to be, I'm assuming, like a fellow late 90s baby, or at youngest an early 2000s baby, because she has an iPod, and iPods were really popular like between like 2005 to about like 2012. I think they stopped being popular like when I entered high school, and I entered high school in 2013. So they were like, there's a certain time frame where they were popular, and Sophie owns an iPod, so I think that's important to know. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is because she's a 12-year-old senior, and I feel like that makes no sense for someone that was raised in that generation, because I went to school in that generation, so she's supposed to be like around my age. And I remember there being special classes for kids that are super smart. They get like special tutoring sessions. They get into college, so because obviously they're gonna get into college at a really young age. I'm pretty sure I've read a story about this little boy who went to college at like age 11, so it's not the rarest thing in the world. Like, I don't think that, and like her being a 12-year-old senior, that is inherently bad, but I think it's bad that she's legitimately being stuck with a bunch of 17-year-olds as a 12-year-old. I just think that's dumb, because she's being socialized with a bunch of 17-year-olds instead of people her own age, and I think that's very dumb. I was like, San Diego's a big city, so I'm like 99.9% sure that there are special programs for kids just like her that are super smart, where she can be, even if the kids aren't like 12-year-old senior level smart, they can still be like, maybe they're 12 and they're a freshman in high school. Like, that's already a lot closer to Sophie in age, well, same age as Sophie, and a lot closer to Sophie in mentality, and that's probably how she can make friends. Because I feel like it's so isolating putting a 12-year-old with a bunch of 17-year-olds. Like, I don't like that. I don't think that's something that would actually happen, especially in today's age, as schools are starting to become more online and they're starting to become more aware of putting kids in like special programs and stuff. Maybe the time was different. Maybe there were 12-year-old high school seniors in like the 90s or 80s whenever Shannon went to high school. I think she was born in the 1980s, so I think she went to high school in the 90s. Maybe that was a thing in the 90s, but it's not a thing when I was in middle school. If a kid was really smart, they'd either bump them up one grade or they'd be taken out and put into special course. And I think that makes a lot more sense, to be taken out and either learn the stuff on your own or be put in with other kids in the city that are equally as smart as you or pretty close to being as smart as you. That way you don't feel isolated as a 12-year-old high school senior with a bunch of 17-year-olds. And another thing that I wrote down was, this is all from the first chapter, by the way. Like, we're like on page 1. Why are the teachers and classmates so mean to her? Is that necessary? Her teacher called her a know-it-all, and her classmates call her curb buster. She's a 12-year-old girl. I don't think that's something that would happen. Like, I think teachers would love her because love little kids, and she'd be the littlest of them all, and people would be like, oh my god, you're so cute. I feel like teachers would absolutely adore her. They wouldn't hate her and call her a know-it-all. And especially, like, I feel like there'd always be like a group of girls that would like be like, oh hey, this is a 12-year-old girl. Like, maybe they'd remind Sophie of their little sister or something. And so I feel like there'd be at least a group of girls that would be like, that would protect Sophie from like bullies and stuff. And also I feel like guys, like, maybe this is just from my high school experience, from my class, but I feel like guys would bully the guys that were bullying Sophie. Like, Sophie gets bullied by a guy named Garwin Chang, and I feel like he would get bullied back for bullying a 12-year-old. Like, you look stupid. You're 17 or you're 18 or 17 bullying a 12-year-old. You look stupid. Like, I'm sorry, and you would probably get called out for that. And I just feel like Shannon wrote this in about her being bullied by the teachers and the students, because even though it is possible, like, I'm sure there are little kids that are bullied by their teachers, and there are kids that are bullied by much older students, but I feel this was written in just to make us feel bad for Sophie, and it's kind of tiring. I feel like she can still get bullied by kids her own age. In fact, I'd probably relate a bit more to it. I don't know. I just feel like it's kind of dumb to put her in a class full of much older kids and then have her be bullied, when I feel like those older kids probably would just ignore her than bully her at worst, and at best they'd probably love her because they're like, oh my god, you remind me of my little sister. I don't think people would inherently be mean to her. And also, her telepathy causes her to have really bad headaches because she's constantly reading other people's minds. It's not something like she can like shut out. I mean, she can, but she just like, but when it comes to human thoughts, she can't really shut them out because they're so loud and proud, and she gets chronic migraines because of it, and it's never really mentioned other than that. That's an actual medical condition. Why is she in school if her headaches are so bad that she always has to have music in her ears? I feel like maybe she'd be on some special medication, or she'd probably have to go to the doctor a lot because of that, but it's not really mentioned besides, oh, Sophie suffers a lot because she gets chronic migraines from these thoughts that she's constantly hearing, and that's something that should be talked about a bit more. I also think it's interesting how Sophie is in a newspaper article without knowing it. That's illegal. Like, she's a minor, and you need a special paperwork just to have a minor in your newspaper. You can't just blast her on front page with her school pictures, just her, and make a whole entire article about it and be okay. You can't just do that with children, especially children that aren't in the public eye. Honestly, I think there should be rules as like if a child's a celebrity, they should also be protected from this stuff. But children that aren't celebrities are particularly protected from not having their faces blasted in front of a newspaper. So this is just highly illegal, and I don't think it's still possible. People still do illegal stuff all the time, but I feel unless you want your newspaper not to be sued for every penny that it's worth, don't put a non-consenting child on the front page of your newspaper. It just felt very weird. It was just brushed over, and the parents just called and complained. So you can sue. You can sue that. Miss Foster sued the newspaper company. You'd probably win. You'd win a lot of money. And it does discuss how Sophie got her telepathy triggered. She got it triggered at the age of 5 when she fell on her head. And as the book progresses, I noticed that she kind of just gains her powers out of nowhere. Like, they just get triggered, and they get triggered not only by their fullest extent, but she never learns how to use her powers. And I'm just not a big fan of that. I like reading books where the main character learns how to use her powers, where they start off as like being a little bit weak, where they don't really have control over their powers, and they can just learn how to use them properly. Sophie really doesn't get to use her powers properly. Specifically, like, yeah, she gets better with telepathy, with her special telepathy classes in school in Foxfire, but she just gets her powers triggered at her fullest extent, and then she just needs a few classes with Tiergan and then her telepathy instructor, and Tiergan legitimately says that there's not much I can teach you. You know too much already. Then how come she can't use them properly? How come she can't defeat the evil, I believe they're called the Neverseen? Why can't she just defeat the Neverseen if she's just that powerful, that she's powerful and the most powerful telepath to exist in this universe? She has so much power, and it's never really used that properly. And I think that stems with the fact that she just gets them triggered at their fullest extent with no rhyme or reason. And this is just a tiny note, just something that I personally don't like. The age gap between Fitz and Sophie. She's 12 and he's 15. Not that big of an age gap, but it does feel kind of weird. Like a 7th grader with freshman or a sophomore in high school with like a 7th or 8th grader. A little bit weird. And obviously I'm just explaining to you guys as the book series goes on why I ranked it as 6 out of 12 stars. I wanted to give you guys the reasons why I ranked it so low, which is why I'm being kind of nitpicky, but these things stood out to me. I also wrote down, why are they on a field trip if the wildflowers are so bad? Like, if it's that dangerous, if it makes you cough just by being outside for a few seconds, and maybe, just maybe, we need to postpone the field trip. I understand that it's important to do these field trips. I love field trips. I think it's mentioned in the book that kids, like all the kids hated field trips. I think it's boring, but my class would have loved field trips. We loved getting out of that school. Like, we were always ready to go on field trips. We would, like, people would sign up for classes just to go on the one end of the year field trip for those classes. So I find it weird kids and just don't seem to care about the field trip. Like, I feel like most kids would just be happy to be out of school and just be like looking at stuff. Like, they'd probably be a little bit more attentive because the stuff that you're learning about is right there in front of you. So it's a little bit easier to learn stuff, which is why teachers take kids on field trips. Another thing that I kind of thought was weird was, why do all elves have to have blue eyes? I think this kind of bothered me because I understand what Shannon is trying to say. Oh, she's trying to make people with brown eyes feel special, but I don't see the reason why to make all elves have blue eyes. My opinion on this would be completely different if brown eyes were the one outliers and then elves had all the other eye colors. Like, elves had blue eyes, green eyes, pink eyes, purple eyes, blue eyes, black eyes, red eyes, all the eye colors on the spectrum. Every single color you can imagine except for brown is elves have. But no, it's just brown or blue eyes. Those are the only two options you kind of have. There are elves with like blue-green eyes, I believe, or blue-gray eyes, or like dark blue eyes, but it's always like a variation of a blue color, and it's never a full-on green even. I just think that's weird, making blue eyes the one eye color when I feel like that could have been done differently. Also, I have a huge problem with Shangri-La, with the way Shangri-La is described in the book. Shangri-La is a myth from Tibet. So the story starts where she goes on a field trip and she meets Fitz at the field trip, and she kind of freaks out because she notices that he can also read minds, so she runs away. They almost got hit by a car, but instead the car hits the lamppost and she stops it with her telekinesis powers, and then they have to run away because people see. And they go to San Diego Zoo parking lot. In the San Diego Zoo parking lot, he kind of teaches her a little bit more about being an elf, and then ends up taking her. He light leaps her, which is how elves get around, Eternalia, and that ends up being a place called Shangri-La. Now, my issue with this is the fact that Shangri-La is a myth from Tibet. It's an Asian myth, I believe. I think it stems from some European talking about it, or there's some sort of European interpretation to it, but it's supposed to be like an Asian myth. I just don't like how it's described. He talks about like, oh, all the stories that you heard about Shangri-La are fake. All the stories you heard about elves and myths and stuff, they're all fake. This is what those cities actually look like. And Eternalia has Disneyland castles, and that didn't rub me the right way because Shangri-La is supposed to have those, those dome-like buildings that kind of turn up, and it's supposed to be an Asian myth. So why are we changing the structures from going from a more traditional Asian building to a more traditional like German castle? I just don't understand what the need for it was. You could have just called it, this is Eternalia, not mention Shangri-La at all. That way Shannon didn't have to take out the actual like cultural elements of that it was supposed to show. And obviously I'll show you guys a picture of what Shangri-La is supposed to look like. Another thing that I didn't like was, why is this series so anti-magic? Because it's not science. Fitz gets offended. Sophie's like, oh, is it science? And he's like, no. Albert Einstein's stupid. Like, science isn't accurate at all. And then she talks, is it magic? And he gets offended too. So if it's not magic and it's not science, then what is it? I don't exactly understand what is going on right there. The very beginning of the book, that it talks about how gnomes are their servants and they like being servants. And I just don't really like the way it's described, like, because, oh, we protect gnomes, so in return, and the way Alden describes it is like, oh, we protect elves, so in return, elves help us by making our food and cleaning up after us and stuff like that, and gardening and stuff. And I'm just like, what are they being protected of, and why can't they protect themselves from it? That way they don't have to be essentially like your little gardeners and your little cooks for the rest of their lives. And the way that it's brushed over in the series is just, oh, they just like it, so. And then Sophie, she's a little bit concerned at first, but then after she's told, oh, they like it, she just never thinks about it again. And I think that's so problematic because, like, why is this going on? Like, it doesn't really need to go on. Oh, and also Sophie can also read animal minds. I almost forgot about that. The mind of a dinosaur. In the book, it's like, dinosaurs are nothing like you were described. They're nothing like the ones at the museum that you were at on your field trip. And it shows a picture and they look exactly like a regular dinosaur, exactly like a regular T-Rex, just with feathers, and it's like neon green. There's also the issue with all elves being beautiful. Elves are described as having darker skin and darker hair, but they all have blue eyes, and they're all super tall and super skinny, and maybe not super tall, but they're seen as being thin and beautiful. And like, again, something that rubbed me the wrong way because people's beauty is described differently. There are certain actors out there, like I can't really think of the guy's name, but there's an actor who I think went bald, and I thought they were okay looking before, but I just don't think they were that attractive bald. But some people prefer this actor having no hair. They think he looks a lot hotter that way. And that's fine, that's their opinion. But in this book, it's treated differently. If you have chubbier, like her family is described as being chubby, and like her dad has balding hair and her parents have weird green eyes. And I just think the way that's described is so weird to me. And also, the way her sister is described is so weird to me because they described her as like, she's already 8 years old and she's already super popular and she's already dumb. And unlike Sophie, who's smart and unpopular. And I'm just like, how is being dumb a good thing? Like, why do her parents prefer her little sister being dumb than being smart? But anyway, going back to the way that the elves look, I think it's so problematic to write that in your children's book. And like, I think there's a few characters with like pimples and stuff. Like, if they were human, they would have pimples and greasy hairs. And I just think that's so problematic. Like, what's wrong with pimples? I mean, I have a lot. Don't look at that. And obviously, one of the biggest concerns that people have is like the similarities with Harry Potter, and that's another reason why I'm deducting points from this series. Sophie, she gets told that she is a magical person, an elf. Same way Harry gets told that he's a magical person, a wizard, and they both end up going to a school, which is Foxfire versus Hogwarts. Which, now that I think about it, that's kind of similar. Like, there's a fox, hog, an animal, wards, fire. That's like a thing. I didn't even realize that until right now. And then she meets her friend's redheaded friend. I think Dex isn't described as having like strawberry blonde hair though, but he's, like, in a lot of pictures he's shown with kind of reddish hair. Her Draco is Dina, and her Hermione is kind of like Biana, I think, because Biana doesn't like her at first, but they end up being friends at the end, which is not the best written friendship I've ever read. Like, I kind of wish they were friends from the get-go instead of Biana being kind of mean to Sophie for no reason. I understand what Shannon was trying to do, but I kind of wish their friendship was a little bit more pure, especially since she doesn't really have, I mean, she does have a female friendship in Morella, but she doesn't really talk to her, so I don't think that's a good, well-run friendship too. But yeah, I kind of wish she had another person that was like Dex, but that was female. I think that would have been great. And then at the end of the book, she ends up getting kidnapped by the evil people because they take her to France to get kidnapped, and then she gets out, and that's how she finds out that she's a polyglot because she can speak French all of a sudden. And it is kind of similar to Potter, where like at the end of the book something happens, and obviously that's just how all the books are written, but this book has just so many uncanny similarities to Harry Potter. Like, even to the mean potions instructor, she has a potion instructor that absolutely despises her, and she's pretty much like Snape 2.0. The reason why the teacher just doesn't like her is never really fully described, which I don't really like. Like, Snape it wasn't a good reason, but it was a reason that was worth understanding. And even then, he was protecting Harry from Quirrell when Quirrell was trying to make him like fall off his broom during the Quidditch match. And also, Sophie's like good at one of the few sports, kind of like how Harry's good at Quidditch. Like right away, Sophie's good at splashing right away, which is like a sport, like a telepathy sport in the book. And yeah, there's just so many similarities. Atlantis reminds me of Diagon Alley. I've been recording for an hour long, but yeah, that's the reason why I gave it a 6 out of 12. Obviously, I focused more on like the negatives because I want to tell you guys why I ranked it so low. Obviously, people have their own preferences. I'm okay if you guys really love the book. I just personally had a lot of like issues with small parts of it, and I understand why people like it. Fully, like, I'd love to discuss the book with you guys. If I say something that you don't disagree with, I'd like to see your own perspective on it. Bye!